Welcome back to Solitary, Poor, Nasty, British, and Short. This week, Scott sits down with Renee B. Adams. Professor Adams focuses on corporate governance and banking, serving as Professor of Finance at the Saïd Business School at Oxford. A former economist at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, her research examines how boards, financial institutions, and decision-making structures shape organizational performance and inequality. Enjoy!
Renee, thanks so much for coming on to the show.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
So I just want to start off by asking, what's your reading at the moment for pleasure, for work?
Reading.
What's on your nightside table?
I have a big pile of books on my bed. So it's all sorts of things. So I don't know if you're familiar with the series Murder Mindfully.
No.
No. So I'm trying to keep up my reading in German.
Okay.
So it's a series about this criminal who goes to mindfulness therapy, and it's absolutely hilarious. So that's one of the pieces.
Is it like animated or is it, animated. It's like a comic book series or what is it?
No. So it's regular sort of crime fiction, comedy. But actually they recently made a Netflix show out of it.
Okay, great.
But yeah.
I have to brush up on my German.
Yeah.
Well, I liked this, the French article, men and women in finance are not typical, building on the Lehman Sisters hypothesis. So maybe moving into some of the papers, could you just tell the audience what was the Lehman Sisters hypothesis and what was, what was the question and your findings with this?
Yeah, so basically, and this does relate to the financial crisis. So the Lehman Sisters hypothesis was that if Lehman Brothers had been Lehman Sisters, then the financial crisis would not have happened.
Meaning what? If the banks had been run by women?
If they had been run by women, exactly. And so several prominent politicians put forth this hypothesis, and actually they fight over who put it forth first, right? But one of them is Christine Lagarde, who said, and I think she still continues to say that, the story is essentially that women are more risk averse than men, supposedly, and that if Lehman Brothers had a bunch of risk averse women running Lehman Brothers, then the financial crisis wouldn't have happened. And so I'm like, well, I think the problem with this argument is people are sort of generalizing from sort of population stereotypes, right? So they're saying, oh, well, the average woman in the population is more risk averse than the average man, and which is sort of a story that's backed up by lots of experiments on college students, which is, maybe not representative of someone who's sitting on the board or would sit on the board
Sure.
of Lehman Brothers, right?
Sure.
So as soon as you look at data for like actual executives, then if anything, the women are the opposite. They're more risk-loving than the men.
Right.
And so, which I think, as soon as you look at the data and, if I show people the data, then people say, oh yeah, of course, makes perfect sense because, you can't be risk averse as a woman in a male-dominated field. You can't be risk averse. In fact, you probably have to be the opposite in order to even pursue that path or get chosen to be in those positions.
Why do you think that? Right, yeah, I totally understand what you're saying about the sampling, which isn't representative. It's not the typical woman who's going to be run, or typical man, typical anyone who's going to be CEO of
exactly
Lehman Brothers. Why do you think it is that women tend to be women in those kinds of positions, whether it's directors or CEOs? I don't know exactly the sample you were looking at. Tend to be less risk averse than men in the same position, like the hyper risk loving. I suppose you could say.
Well, I think there's two arguments. One is it's a risky career path for a woman, right? Because it's a male dominated industry.
Right.
So to actually say, well, I'm going to go and do something that's unusual,
right?
It's atypical, right? Then that means you're risk loving.
Yeah.
And because you may fail, right? And then second, the other explanation is the people who are chosen for those roles, right? I mean, like, are the banks really going to
for that?
Yeah, they're selected for that, right? So are the banks really going to be saying, oh, we want this woman? In fact, probably historically they might have discriminated against women because they thought they were too risk averse, right?
Right.
So like
If we're
that's
gonna
exactly
if we're gonna take one, we're gonna take a
exactly
extra risk. I suppose there's also the selection effects of those who make it to the top, right? It's go big or go home, like they've engaging in a lot of risk. So
Yeah.
it's the biggest risk takers who get to the top, but for every one that's there, there's many who tried and turned back along the way, or whatever the metaphor is.
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
Interesting. Whereas men on what were you looking at, directors or CEOs? Do you remember what the data set was for that?
Yeah, so I have both. So I have directors and executives, some CEOs.
And what was the geography?
So actually now I have some pretty robust evidence across different geographies. So I have data for Sweden. I have data for sort of an international sample, directors in different countries. And now I'm trying to think the French paper, you're testing my memory. I can't remember if it was a Swedish data. I think it was a Swedish data I used for that. But you see the same thing in international data.
Right.
So directors and executives.
Yeah, so the men, the male directors, executives, and such, they're obviously, or maybe not obviously, I would imagine that they're less risk averse than the average Joe. But
yeah, exactly.
What your finding was that so they're obviously risk loving, but
right.
not as risk loving as their female counterparts.
Exactly. So that's part of the point of the paper was, men and women in finance are not typical. So if you're in finance anyhow, you're sort of less risk averse than the average person.
Right.
But then the women are particularly less so.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, that makes sense.
So being in finance means you're not typical, right? And obviously it makes sense because finance is an industry where it's about risk, right? So you don't enter into finance if you're super risk averse.
Yeah.
Anyhow, right? But then the women who do it are like,
super gung ho.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose you mentioned Sweden. I saw another one in your papers. Are CEOs born leaders? Lessons from traits of a million individuals. Maybe you just have to be tall.
Yeah.
Also, that's wild. I've seen studies about the this was for traders in particular. It was about the index finger length.
Yeah.
But yeah, what were your findings with the lessons from traits of a million individuals?
Yeah. So there, the question was, is it nature or nurture? And so what we had for Sweden, which is like cool data that you can't really get elsewhere, or maybe some countries, but anyhow, so we have IQ scores for current executives and directors, and the IQ scores
How do you get IQ scores?
Yeah, so that comes from the military.
They have compulsory military service?
Yeah, so they have compulsory military service. So you're drafted at age 18. So the scores are at age 18.
Only for men?
Only for men.
I was going to say, I know a number of Swedish girls. As far as I know, none of them were.
Yeah. No, it's only for men.
Interesting.
And then, so they have the IQ scores, and then...
I'm sorry, I'm just hung up on it. How is it, like 6 months or a year, or what? How long do they spend in it?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure it's still compulsory, so...
Okay, but it was at the time that you got the...
Well, yeah.
Well, right, because the directors are going to be older.
Yeah, they're older, so yeah.
Anyway,
yeah.
Sorry. Continue.
Yeah.
So you had all this data.
Yeah.
I guess.
We had
will fluctuate, but
yeah,
IQ
exactly.
score, all this stuff.
Yeah, IQ score and leadership scores.
Eye color.
Probably. Could be.
I've seen studies about like eye color, or I haven't seen them. I heard someone at a cocktail party mention the thing.
Okay.
Certain eye colors are overrepresented in U.S. presidents or something.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. I'm not sure about the index finger. Maybe we have.
That was a. I don't think that would be something they typically measured in the military. That was one particular. It was for traders, like their
it's testosterone,
their risk tolerance.
Yeah.
Your testosterone's tied to how long your fingers are, really?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh,
I think it's the risk.
Yeah.
Because there's this paper about entrepreneurs in Italy where they also, for some reason, they have this data
Do they have entrepreneurs in Italy, or did they regulate them out of the country?
Yeah. Well, that gets to another question: is who's an entrepreneur, right? But anyhow, um,
Sorry. So this CEO born leaders. I've
yeah,
interrupted. Please.
yeah. So essentially, let me try and reconstruct it because that's a paper I haven't thought about for a while. So essentially, the question is, essentially, so is it nature or nurture? Like, do you fight your way to the top, or are you sort of intrinsically are you super smart to begin with, and then you are more likely to end up in a top position? And so we found that CEOs are very smart, not necessarily at the extreme, right? So I think there were some categories. I'm not sure where academics fell. Academics were pretty smart, but there's some categories of occupations where people maybe were slightly smarter. But CEOs, if you sort of combine, um, you know, IQ, leadership scores, and for some reason height, then CEOs tend to be, more likely to fall in the extreme distribution of that, which speaks to sort of like being born. So a lot, it relates to sort of intrinsic ability as being important for leadership positions, but not necessarily. I mean, the good message is it's not like they were necessarily always the superstars.
Well, I'm not sure. So I'm sorry. So you're saying some of this stuff is heritable. You're born with your height, controversial, but maybe some part of your IQ is that's you're born with. But so what was the nurture aspect of it? Or you found you came on the side of nature. This paper came on the side of nature.
Yeah, more on the nature side, if I remember correctly. And then we had, but actually, I don't really remember. We had this whole compensation analysis, but now I forget. Anyhow,
That's all right. People can look up the paper.
but the height thing was interesting because I was like, height shouldn't matter, so we shouldn't put it in.
You think it mattered for women too? Do you remember, or only men?
Well, no, we don't have the women.
Oh,
See,
you
that's
don't,
the thing.
because they weren't in the military.
Yeah.
You don't have the height.
Yeah.
But then you go around, you have to just measure.
Well, so subsequently, people, or maybe not necessarily subsequently, people have tried to use the military data for, brothers,
Right.
in order to infer the characteristics of women. I'm not sure how successful that's been, but
How would you do that?
so you just say, like, you use the IQ of the brother as a proxy for the woman's IQ.
No, but for height.
Oh yeah, for height. Yeah, I don't know. So then you would say, well, I guess you use the height of the brother
That's
as
not
approximate.
correlated.
Yeah.
Can't be
So it's
correlated.
like,
There's a gender dimorphism that would.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
IQ, maybe I could see it.
Yeah. But then anyhow, the question is whether height should matter. So I mean, it was interesting because I was against having the height because I was like, I didn't understand it. I was like, why does height matter? It doesn't make
Apparently
any
it
sense. Yeah. And my co-authors, I have one really tall co-author on the paper, and he was like, no, we have to have the height in there.
Of course. Maybe he'll be a CEO. We talked about that. Okay, well, coming more to the some of your more recent stuff, still a few years ago now, but the 2021, culture of the finance profession, evidence from the 2020 to 2021 American Finance Association survey. What were your findings there?
Okay. All right. So we had lots of findings. So the story behind that paper is, and actually it's interesting that you asked me about that. So we were just, my co-founder and I, a friend of mine and I, we set up the Women's Committee for the American Finance Association, which was trying to engage the finance profession in thinking a bit more deeply about the reasons why women are essentially underrepresented in academic finance. So we set up this committee, and we just won a prize, or were awarded a prize in recognition of our effort, because that was actually some effort to try to get this initiative going. And one thing that we did as part of that initiative was to do a survey of American Finance Association members. And so, we had lots of questions on the survey. And so we wrote two pieces. So one is what's good for women is good for science, evidence from the American Finance Association. And then we had this report, which was sort of an, we hoped that it would be something that deans would read. I'm not sure that any deans read it. So it's one of those things where you write a paper and you think, oh, this is going to be like, it's going to have so much impact, right? It's so important. And then nobody reads it and you're like, what the heck?
It's the story of everybody's PhD ever.
Yeah, exactly. So anyhow, so we found many things. I mean, we looked at many things. So like, for example, we looked at, some things we looked at were just like job satisfaction in finance.
High, low, medium.
So we don't have a good benchmark.
Sure.
But
Base rate neglect.
yeah,
Avoid that.
but it looked to us that generally people were not so happy. And it's interesting that one of the things that they complained about, so they were able to give like free form comments at the end, so
Right.
we compiled them. And the thing they probably complained about most was sort of the, let's see, what did we call it? It was the sort of the hierarchy in the profession. The elitism in the profession and everything sort of being dominated by like 4 institutions.
Right.
The journals not being open to new ideas. And essentially, so I would argue it's
The journal. Are you
the
sure
journals.
academics or bankers?
No, academics.
Oh, the American Finance Association is academic.
Yeah, it's academics.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about.
No.
Yeah.
No,
'Cause
I
it's
have
like-
surveyed bankers.
I have a lot of friends who are bankers. I don't know that they're part of the Finance Association. I don't know what that is.
Yeah. So
Okay,
sorry.
these are academics.
Yeah, academics.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So the hierarchy of what that Oxford and HBS or whatever and
And
Chicago.
Oxford doesn't count. It's like Harvard, Chicago, MIT.
That they put out all the
That
literature.
basically they so if you look at so the American Finance, just for some context, so the American Finance Association is sort of the prestigious professional association for finance academics.
Okay.
It's the most prestigious.
Yeah.
Because it also runs our most prestigious journal, which is the Journal of Finance.
Right.
And so if you look at presidents of the American Finance Association, they're going to be from Harvard, Chicago, MIT, Stanford.
All the places.
Not Oxford.
Yeah.
But so it's like the sort of people with power tend to be from a couple of institutions.
Sure.
And so that's what people complain about, because
Except for the people who are there.
except for the people who are there, they love it, of course. Right.
And they're always like, to pretend how
Yeah, it's all merit. of course.
egalitarian.
Yeah, exactly. Everything's just merit.
Okay, and what's good for women is good for science. What is good for women, and also what's good for science? It just sounds to be the same thing.
Yeah. So what's good for women is
What are good
essentially-
for female finance academics?
Yeah. So I guess essentially leveling the playing field, making it easier for women to succeed in finance. So we did some of our survey questions related to how comfortable people are about speaking out, like in conferences, asking questions,
Yeah.
All of those things. And so women were sort of systematically less comfortable.
Right.
And so we're like, well, that's not good for science, right? Because if you don't feel the science is about the exchange of ideas, right? So if you can't express your opinion, you can't exchange ideas, then we're not actually doing science well, right? And so we argued, that we need to think about these things.
You think finance is more of an art or a science or a false dichotomy? Bit of both.
No, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a science. I guess it depends on the definition of science, right? But
That's what I think about history of science. What is
Yeah.
science?
yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, you do research, you try to uncover the truth. Can finance academics do it? I think so, right? Are there parts of the field that are not scientific? Yes, of course, right? But that's true of any field,
Sure.
right?
Sure. I mean, so what? This is maybe a disciplinary question, but like, my graduate work is nominally in history, but there are people doing history not in the history department. In the law school, there's legal historians, and in Oxford's philosophy faculty, there's less, but there's some people doing, history of philosophy, area studies. Like other people do history. So the question is, does finance tend to live in business schools or in economics programs? Because like your PhD is from, it's not from Booth. It's from the economics.
From the economics department.
Right.
Yeah.
But there are people in economics departments who do, financial economics, and there are people at business schools who do finance, and then also all kinds of other things. So does it just live in both, or where do you...
No, mostly in business schools.
Business schools.
Yeah.
Okay.
But a lot of people, so basically it's an arbitrage opportunity for economists, right? Because like if you study economics, you can go into finance.
Yeah.
If you study finance, you can't go into economics.
Why not?
It would be very difficult. So first, you don't have the training. I mean, it's not like it's completely impossible, but like generally speaking, you don't see someone with a finance PhD ending up in an economics department. But also, well, I guess one reason could also be that economics departments pay less, right? So, but also, I don't think that they would be accepted from a sort of disciplinary standpoint,
Right.
Because finance is considered a subfield of economics,
Right.
by economists,
Right.
So it's sort of like, you belong at a business school because, like what would they teach? So
I don't know. I have a friend who has a history PhD, and he's at a business school.
yeah. Well, but I think that's exactly it. So like business schools are sort of more
Aggregators.
Yeah, they're more sort of like, in some sense interdisciplinary, if you want to call it that.
But within Saïd, within Booth, whatever, there will be the finance group or finance area.
Yeah.
And what is academic finance?
Some people would say what I do is not necessarily finance, and I'm like, well, it's interesting. So I consider myself an applied micro person.
Okay.
But I do governance, which for some reason is considered a finance subject. I don't know why. But in some countries it's considered an accounting subject. And so like you see governance people sitting in different groups, but you never really see a governance person sitting in the economics department.
Right.
Which is, I don't know why. Maybe it's too practical or anyhow. So, and then what is a finance academic? Basically, you do economics, but applied to finance subjects, right? So,
what is finance?
Well, very good question. I'm always like, no, it's a very good question. I mean, you're interested in issues around, well, for example, risk taking, right? You're interested in sort of the financial sector, so financial institutions, right? You would study like capital markets, asset pricing, more likely to be done in finance than in economics.
Let's zoom out before we zoom back. I mean, finance at its core, like what is the idea of financing? It's taking capital to invest in other things.
Yeah.
It's how would you describe it? We all kind of like we know when we see it.
Yeah. No, I know. It's a good question. I mean,
you hear about the financialization of the American economy, like over the latter half of the 20th century. We build the cars, we sell the cars, people drive them, and then you hear about there's Wall Street, whatever, the financialization of the 80s. People, the companies getting sold off for parts, and the Wall Street's sort of boom. What is finance to the uninitiated, or even particularly for the initiated? Because I know many people work in finance. I worked in finance. Many people are in it, but they, you lose the forest for the trees.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, I guess if you say economics is sort of the science of choices, then finance might be the science of financial choices, right? But then you could say, what's a financial choice? And that could be anything related to, money, but not necessarily just money, right?
Yeah.
So it is a bit tricky. like I'm in a finance department. I do governance. Why is that finance?
I
Right.
suppose it deals with money downstream.
It deals with money. It deals with power. Right. So, I mean, basically what I do is all about power, which is, finance and power, they go together very well.
Yeah.
Right. It's almost like, but is finance power? I'm not totally sure. So I don't have a good definition,
Sure.
but
Maybe that's the point.
yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I teach this class on, well, now it's called evidence-based leadership, diversity, and decision-making. So I talk a lot about, like, for example, like stereotypes and women in the finance industry and whatever. And when I go into the class, I'm sort of like, so I'm in the finance group. Why am I teaching this class?
Yeah.
Right. And I try to make a case, but I'm always like, they must think it's so weird because why am I teaching this class? And I'm like, well, I do research in this space. My papers are published in these journals, but it's not totally obvious, but maybe it doesn't have to be.
Right.
Like, it's like, why do we need to, like, these disciplines are a bit artificial anyhow, right?
Yeah. Yeah, they're artifacts of.
Yeah.
I know of a professor friend who says all these departments are artifacts of
Yeah.
19th century Germany.
Yeah, exactly.
There used to be an academy. You would study. You would there's
Yeah.
distinction in literature, philosophy. You would history. You would study. You would study your topic.
Yeah.
All of this, the DPhil. We're going to be a hyper specialist in this kind of thing is a modern affliction, I guess you could say. But I mean, a lot of what you're describing sounds like psychology, like social psychology. Is it? Again, like the disciplinary boundaries are amorphous, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Is that a discipline that you work with a lot, or would you just say like that is what I'm doing? I wouldn't distinguish.
Yeah. I mean, so right now I have this whole strand of research on human values, and I'm like,
Is that philosophy?
is
that
it
finance?
Like, is it like it's interesting because the values are measured using a framework by a psychologist,
Yeah.
but there's also a lot of people in sort of it's very close to people who are ethicists and people who study morality, but then also there's some economists working in this space. So I'm like, I don't know, like what is it? I don't know,
Yeah.
right? But does it matter?
No.
I mean,
Yeah, no, it doesn't. You have quite a long CV. I read through all of it. I read through the very last line down.
So my papers better than I do.
Down to your.
Because I'm like, what did I do in that paper? I can't remember.
From the graphic medicine movement to your Instagram handle.
Oh, wow.
I got everything.
Wow, that's
I
amazing.
went through everything. There are time in Finland. All of it. The lunch talks. No, so what are the human values that you're measuring?
So we use this framework by Shalom Schwartz, who's a psychologist, who has this framework which has 10 human values. So there's like security orientation is one, which relates to risk aversion. There's tradition orientation. There's self-direction, achievement orientation, power orientation. And so essentially sort of 10 dimensions of human values.
What are the 10? You just mentioned like 3.
Okay, you want me to go through that?
yes.
Okay, so hedonism.
Yeah.
Okay, wait. So okay, achievement, power, hedonism, security, self-direction, stimulation, tradition, conformity, universalism. What am I missing? I mentioned self-direction, right?
Good.
Conformity. Oh, benevolence.
Benevolence.
Yeah.
What is universalism?
It's caring about others.
Oh, right. Okay. And so you're measuring these obviously quantitatively.
Yeah, using surveys.
Right.
Yeah. So that's how I do like the French paper you mentioned.
Right.
So we surveyed directors in Sweden, and so I have measured the security orientation comes from that survey.
What have been some of the very preliminary findings, or what's been something that surprised you in this?
Well, I mean, lots of cool stuff, but a lot of related to, well, Okay, so I started off studying the values because we were interested in understanding how much directors care about shareholders as opposed to stakeholders,
Right.
which we studied. I think our paper was published in 2011. So before people were like talking about it obsessively, like now everyone's talking about this, corporate purpose and whatever. But basically what we were doing is we were looking, we said, well, whose interests you prioritize as a function of your values. And then basically what we showed is, for example, the more universalist you are, which is the more other regarding, the more pro-stakeholder you were, as opposed to being pro-shareholder
Right.
as a director.
Right.
Okay, but then the more achievement and power-oriented you were, the more pro-shareholder you were. So essentially, which is interesting because we sort of think that, well, yeah, it goes back to, the way people think matters for how they make decisions, right? Which I think has lots of interesting implications for thinking about, the regulation and, is it the board size or who you have on the board,
Yeah.
right? So we sort of think it's who you have on the board that matters, right? And so those are some of the interesting findings. So that we did like an initial Swedish survey, and then we did an international survey where we said, well, how much of this is driven by individual values versus the law? So I worked with a corporate law scholar.
Right.
And so, you might sort of expect that in the US, which is very pro-shareholder, the directors would be more pro-shareholder
Right.
as opposed to pro-stakeholder. Turns out the law doesn't really matter. But what really matters is personal values and culture. So if you're in a culture that's sort of more egalitarian, you're more pro-stakeholder, for example.
What's the distinction between shareholder and stakeholder again? Just
Yeah.
for
So no, I mean, good question. But so
the
basically,
uninitiated.
so stakeholder would be like employees, the community, creditors. You could consider the environment. We didn't consider it explicitly in our analysis, but
They're the stakeholders, and the shareholders are the owners.
are the owners. Yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of shareholder, I saw your paper, shareholderism around the world, corporate purpose, culture, and law. I suppose that's the paper you're referring to.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about this. In your own personal experience, you've been all over the place in Sweden, Australia, at UNSW, and then UQ, Finland. Many appointments, I should say. Have you noticed, again, like not in a in an anecdotal way? You're in an economics department in Sweden. You're in like a finance department in Sweden, or a department in Australia, Finland. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed sort of differences? And I'm sorry, I'm struggling to articulate this. Differences in the cultures of each place, which like flowed into the workplace. Like, we do things a little bit differently here. We do things a little bit differently here, and therefore the output is rather different. Or is there a kind of, you're members of this fraternity, sorority of finance academic people, so it's just the same everywhere?
No, I think culture matters a lot. I mean, the sameness comes because you're in the same profession, and so sort of you're expected to produce papers.
Yeah.
Right? Everywhere you're expected to produce papers.
Yeah.
But how you produce them and sort of like how important they are and all the other stuff, a lot of that is cultural.
Right.
And I think that's really important. So culture matters a lot. If you're in a place with a great culture, then people can be super productive. If you're in a place with not so great culture, then it's just like, and then people say, oh, why is that place, they don't produce very much. Part of it is culture, right? Of course, there can be good places that have culture where they don't care and people have a great time and they don't produce that much and they're happy, they're fine with that, right? But no, I think culture is really important.
Culture being like supporting each other, not working yourself to death.
Yeah, and how the place is run.
Right.
I mean, like, it's sort of amazing. Like, it's so funny, like, even like basic how things are organized, like how tasks are organized, who calls the shots,
Right.
who has power.
Too many meetings.
how many meetings you have, you
I saw
know,
your paper on that. Yeah, death by
death
committee.
by committee. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a funny name.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's lots of dimensions to culture, you know, how you support the juniors. Um, you know, are you tolerant of, you know,
Dissenting views and such.
yeah, dissenting views, which is a really important one. You know, does everyone have a voice? How does hiring work? I mean, all sorts of, you know, there's lots of different dimensions where departments can differ dramatically.
Right. I mean, I'm interested in Australia because I lived there with
Yeah.
that experience. What was it? What was it like in Australia at UNSW and UQ?
Um, so finance in Australia, when I arrived there, was quite behind, um, you know, elsewhere. I mean, in
So I
terms of,
recruited you. Turn it around.
well, yeah, I think, what was interesting, it's not like they were necessarily begging me to come.
Right.
So basically my job market in Australia is, I had a boyfriend at the time who was moving to Australia, and I was like, well, I've never heard of any places in Australia. Like, let me just write to them. And like, they didn't post ads.
Right.
Like, they didn't do hiring the same way as everyone else did,
Yeah.
because it was just like a totally different stage of development for finance academia. So I just wrote to a bunch of universities and I said, you know, do you have a job? And some people were like, oh yeah, that'd be great. And some people were like, meh, you know, so anyhow, so then I ended up in Queensland. Let's see. So, and what was the question?
Vegas.
What's that?
In
Yeah,
Bris-
Vegas. Yeah. And so, yeah, so some things, but because it was sort of at the stage where, you know, like essentially when I got to Australia, people were like, you're a god if you publish a lot. It doesn't matter where you publish.
Right.
So I was not a goddess,
Right.
because I was aiming for like what are considered our top journals,
Right.
which is very hard to achieve.
Yeah.
And you don't pump out like,
You'd rather have one in
yeah,
prestigious journal than 10 in the lesser journal.
exactly, which is sort of like,
Didn't equate to what the Australians wanted.
no, the
They didn't
Australians
care.
wanted like lots and lots of stuff.
In the mediocre journals.
Yeah. So it didn't matter where.
Yeah.
So now it's changed. So now they're like, oh yeah, no, we want stuff in the top journals.
Because you turned around, dude. You made Australia.
No, I don't
a
think
global
so.
hub of... I have a friend. He's a finance. He's at WA now. He did his PhD at UTS in finance. He was actually the very first person I ever interviewed on a podcast many moons ago. It was probably 2021. But I mean, like Australian culture. Did you find it to be Australian workplace culture? Did you find it to be more laid back? Like, I mean, it's certainly not Morton, or Chicago. Did you find, like, how did you find navigating that as coming from an American background? Like, personally, when I worked in Australia, it was an adjustment. You know, people, they take long lunches and they leave the office at 4:00.
Yeah.
And when you stay later, it's like not appreciated. It's seen as a kind of affront.
Well, there's the tall poppy syndrome.
Yeah.
Right? Which is, I very much think is true.
Yeah, I absolutely experienced.
Yeah. So I did experience that. So
as the big bad Chicago PhD bearer coming from the Fed.
Exactly.
Like,
well, I came from Stockholm.
Oh.
I was at the Stockholm School of Economics before
That's
that.
pretty good too.
Yeah, exactly.
So
but
you came with this fancy resume and fancy PhD, and they're like, "Oh, who does this chick think she is?" Kind of.
So it was not like, you know, you might say, oh well, like, you know, I should have some respect, right? But but it was not like people were, whoa, you know, like, let's give her some resources, or like, you know. So there were some people who were like, whoa, people like, they're the gods and they got resources, but it wasn't me.
Right.
And it was interesting because, you know, so when I left UNSW, basically I left UNSW because I'm like, okay, I'm never going to get resources here.
Right.
Because I don't fall into
public university.
Yeah, well, I don't, but it's because I don't tick the boxes that they want me to tick.
Which is what? Publishing
Publishing
a lot
lots
in
of
the
stuff.
mediocre journals.
Yeah, or even, you know, like like there was very little tolerance for sort of like I was working on stuff,
Yeah.
but there was very little tolerance, and I was tenured,
Yeah.
right? So technically, you can do hard stuff when you're tenured. I mean, that's sort of like the ideal is like you get tenure and then you do all the risky stuff,
Yeah.
which is exactly what I was doing,
Right.
right? Plus, I was running this women's committee of the American Finance Association, so I was
Right.
like
You were
working in the
busy and doing a
I
lot of
was,
stuff.
yeah, I was, and then I was an editor at a journal and whatever, but I wasn't ticking the publication box, so that meant I didn't get any resources. And I was like, well, I have to leave. I don't have a choice. And then I was looking for jobs in Australia because I was like, well, I don't know where to go. Where should I go next, right? Because I've been, different places. And it wasn't like people were like, whoa, yeah, it'd be so great if you came here, right? So, I mean, it was pretty interesting. So one place I said, oh, would you guys be interested? So again, I write to people. I say, oh, would you guys be interested, right?
Which one was that?
That was Melbourne.
Okay.
So I wrote to Melbourne. I was like, would you guys be interested? And they really had to think really hard. I mean, they really had to think
Do
hard.
they have a business school, University of Melbourne?
Yeah. Actually, it's considered to be, well, now I think UNSW has beat them, but I think historically Melbourne was considered to be the best
Right.
finance department in Australia.
Okay.
So anyhow, so I write to Melbourne and they were like, let me get back to you and hemming and hawing and, whatever. Anyhow, so in the meantime, I write to Oxford and I'm like, do you have a job? And they happen to have a job.
Right.
So then I fly here, I do the interview, whatever, so like it's all going on. I'm looking for jobs elsewhere. I'm not waiting for Melbourne, right? And taking them a long time. And so finally I accept the Oxford offer and then Melbourne calls and they're like, oh yeah, we would be interested.
Right.
And I was like,
They lost their chance.
well, sorry, but I'm going to Oxford.
When did UQ happen? Oh, before
UQ was
UNSW.
before UNSW.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I was just like, I mean, it was so funny because I'm like, what have I done to them? Like, my CV speaks for itself,
Yeah.
right? I mean, my citation record speaks for itself. And I'm just like, what is it about, there's something that just, anyhow. So tall poppy syndrome is very real.
Yeah. No, well, this isn't tall poppy syndrome, but my experience with the University of Melbourne was that, I was looking at different PhD programs and basically I narrowed it down to a short list of programs, geography agnostic around the world. One of them was at the University of Melbourne. And so I basically just tried. I found the guy, and the guy was interested. And I had this insane project at the time that nobody wanted to touch because it was just too crazy and not disciplinarily focused. It was literature, philosophy, AI ethics, and history. It was this like grand. It was a 600-year retrospective on human flourishing and eudaimonia, right? And everyone's like, this is not a PhD thesis. This is like a bunch of books written together. And I was like, no, it's a PhD thesis. Anyway, so I found this guy at the University of Melbourne who was like, because nobody, including in Oxford, there was across faculties are like, this is not a DPhil. This is like 7 DPhils. You can't do that. But anyway, so I found this guy, and I was staying. I was in Massachusetts at the time. I kept trying to talk to him, right? But because of this like 17-hour time difference or whatever it was, we like couldn't. He kept suggesting times that were at like 4:00 in the morning, and I was, and I couldn't meet at that time, and I wasn't. Sometimes I've been willing to get up, and like Melbourne enough to get up at like 4:00.
Yeah.
And so that one just totally fell through the cracks. And then the other thing about that guy, he said, as you probably know from personal experience, they really overwork you or whatever in terms of the admin.
Yeah,
So he had like, I don't know, 12 University of Melbourne. He said, even if I wanted to take you on, I'm at my, like, I can't take on another PhD student until someone finishes. And, these guys are stretching on their PhD. I don't know when they're going to finish, but it should be finished by 2027. And, I wanted to do the fall 2026 start.
Yeah.
Anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
Neither one of us ended up at the University of Melbourne.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, there's some really good parts. There were some great people in Australia, but
I
the
love.
culture was difficult academically.
Yeah, I don't know. I think about it every day. I don't think of Australia as a particularly intellectual place, which at the time really bothered me because I was trying to do intellectual stuff there. I was an editor at a magazine. But I think about Australia every day. Like I really came to appreciate it for what it was. It's maybe the only country of its kind in the world. The happiness and satisfaction of everyday people, even though they aren't particularly thoughtful or introspective or intellectual. This is a gross generalization. There's a huge thriving middle class. People have a good quality of life.
Good coffee.
Yeah, good coffee, good
Good food.
surfing. Well, it's just really pleasant. I mean, where
Yeah.
do you live in in Sydney?
In South Coogee.
Okay, yeah. I mean, come on, like on the beach. I was in Bondi. Yeah, we used to go to Coogee Pav and was it Coogee Bay Hotel, the one that's
Yeah.
big, the big garden. So I was just like inebriated English and Irish guys, banging their fist on the table. I was more like Dutch and Brazilian, but it was all backpackers.
Yeah.
Yeah, good times, good times. Okay, so I mean, this is a more general question where we're sort of wrapping up here. Um, this is something I think about frequently, like writing about it versus doing it. I'm writing about uh, my topic is sort of Sino-American competition and I'm looking at COVID, but COVID as a lens into sort of U.S.-China relations. Do you ever get the urge to, go be on the board of a bank, or you much prefer what you're doing, like the academic side versus the practitioner side? Yeah.
Well, that gets into the whole question of selection, right? So, I mean, there are academics. Well, I mean, I have colleagues who do consulting work.
Seems like everyone's doing
Everyone's doing it, and I'm like,
just for
nobody's
money.
asked
Do
me.
they like it? Why do they do
Well,
it?
no, but like you also have to be asked, right? It's not like, I mean, as an academic, you don't like go out and say, oh, well, I guess you can just say, well, I'm going to advertise my consulting services.
Everyone does that now.
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, anyhow. But it's funny because a company did call me up recently, and they said, yeah, it's so strange because we have all these academics and in the government, like we really need people in the governance space. And we were like, well, why don't we have you? And why are you working for something? I'm like, well, no, nobody's ever asked me, right? And I was like, yeah, it's a bit strange. So, but on the other hand, maybe also not strange, right?
So are you going to do it?
Well, I mean, I'm interested. It's sort of like it's sort of a legal consulting company, so it depends on the cases that they have. So I mean, I think it'd be super interesting to look at, get some practical experience and see what they're working on. But I have to wait for something to show up. But yeah, being on a board or something would be interesting. But
I don't know. You worked at the Fed, and now I guess. I suppose the work isn't that diff. The Fed is also like overlooking, looking on. But I mean, like, like being on the board of a bank or like that never, you were never driven to.
Well, I mean, I guess
do the corporate governance.
Well, I don't think that would be something. I mean, you don't just become a director, right? Like, how do you become a director? I think it's really difficult. I think there are a lot of people who want to become directors, and then they have to spend a lot of time trying to invest in becoming directors, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to be on someone's radar. You have to know the people. You have to. I mean, I think that would take, probably more work than it'd be,
willing to do.
So I was
it's a different thing. It's a different skill set. It's a different, there's a difference between publishing papers about directors and doing the work of a director. And some people probably would not enjoy doing the work of a director in the same way that many directors probably wouldn't write anything of publishable quality.
Yeah, I'm sure they wouldn't necessarily like to do the research, although I think, yeah, some people would like to do the research. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have friends who are sit on boards. Like, I have some friends when Italy passed a gender quota, and so
like a board
board
thing,
gender
the
quota.
California
Yeah,
type of thing.
exactly. And then some of my friends who were sort of like prominent economists who happen to be women were tapped to sit on boards because of the board gender quota. And so they said that, I mean, they had amazing experiences. I mean, also some really difficult experiences. So they said it was really interesting, but also, of course, very time consuming, right? So,
Yeah.
which is interesting. It sort of goes back to this, how do you evaluate an academic? Like, is it just the papers, or, if you're doing something that takes time away from writing of the papers, then you have to sort of figure out how do you balance that, right? But I'm definitely, I mean, I think it'd be an interesting experience as long as I didn't have to sit on the audit committee.
Well, I'll make sure you get sufficient perks. Nice dinner, nice lunch.
Yeah, right.
Hotel room, whatever. Last couple of questions here. Valuations, right? Do you think, I mean, all valuations are inherently just like made up, right? Like we have to calculate them somehow. But there has been a lot of scrutiny in recent years. I mean, it's died down a bit, but like the 2022 sort of tech valuations, which are just these insane, the valuations with 10, 15 times multiples. What would you say to the criticism that valuations are always a little bit misleading or a little bit dishonest intentionally?
Wow. I don't know. The whole valuation game. I had to teach valuation when I came to Oxford. They asked me to teach corporate valuation.
I know, that's why it's so
Yeah. And I've never had a worse. I mean, I was just like, it was hell. I was just like,
even teaching it.
No, it was hell. I was just like,
Why? Because
it was just like, and I tried to get out of it, and I was just like, I have to get out of this class because this is just so not my thing. It's against everything I stand for.
right. Just like
which is critical thinking.
Inflating your
What? Because like as soon as you put up the net present, like there's no theory.
right.
Right. And I'm just like, where the heck is the theory here? It's just like a bunch of like, oh, what do you do in practice? I'm like, I don't know, because I've never been in practice.
Right.
Right. So you should get someone who's in practice to teach this class, because like as soon as you put up the net present value formula, like that's basically it for me. Right. That's all the theory there is. Right. And I'm like, this whole thing is a joke. Right. So it was miserable. I hated it so much. I was just like, this completely sucks.
Fair enough.
And then I had to go in there and like, try to bring up enthusiasm and whatever, but it was miserable.
Right.
I've never had a worse teaching experience in my life.
Well, that answers the question.
Yeah. So I will not yeah. And occasionally people are like, oh, don't you want to teach value? I'm like, no, I will not teach that. I mean, some people like it, more power to them. It's great. But I'm just like, this is just not my thing, right? I'm like about like digging deep and trying to understand and what's the mechanism or whatever. And I'm just like, that's just not me.
And what are you teaching right now?
So I teach the PhD students, so the DPhils. I teach a class which is professional development. So we go through like, essentially talking about the publication process and, all the flaws and.
Oh, for the academics.
Yeah, for academics. And then I teach empirical corporate finance, which essentially how do you do empirical research. And then I teach, on the MBA EMBA side, I teach this class called Evidence-Based Leadership, Diversity and Decision Makings, so which is essentially policy evaluation, but in the sort of gender space or inclusion space, which is really fun to teach because nobody wants to take the class.
So what do you get, like private lessons with like two people?
Essentially.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Tutorials.
Yeah. And then, what's really funny is because because the class is actually super hard.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really hard because I'm like, okay, we talk about causality, we talk about identification, we deconstruct McKinsey reports, like we go through all the blah, blah, in the space, and we think about it, right?
Yeah.
And we confront the blah, blah with data and evidence or whatever. And so it's a hard course, a hard exam. But I think a lot of people like some people take it because they understand what it is. So the people who take it are like, wow, this class rocks, right?
These are MBA students? Or-
MBA and executive MBA.
Right.
So the people who take it, they're just like, whoa, like you're just like, it's amazing because like it's like, and yeah. So I get really good rave reviews from the people who take it, but then some people either don't take it because they think it's fluff. It's going to be fluff, right? Or some people take it because they think it's going to be fluff, right? So I have the people thinking it's going to be fluff, and then they do the exam and then they fail, right? Because they thought it was going to be fluff, and I'm like, no, this is a hard class, right? Because we're doing policy evaluation. We're like, do gender quotas work, and like how could one do it differently, and what are the underlying problems? So like big societal issues, right? So yeah, so I like that class because valuation for me, I'm just like, oh, like I could seriously care less. But here I really care. But then of course, everyone wants to take the valuation class and nobody wants to take the, deep thinking, societal problems. How do we think critically and challenge the status quo class, right? So that's a bit of but then the people who do take it, we have fun.
Yeah.
So I enjoy teaching it regardless, but
I suppose it's a question of why one gets an MBA. It may not always be to think critically.
Well, I know. But then also I'm like, my God, it's so expensive. And I'm like, you're going to pay that amount of money and you don't actually want to learn anything? I mean, really? Like, and I had the very first time I taught my class, it was so great. I had this guy in my class from Brazil who was very like, well regarded amongst the executive MBA students. And so in the very first lecture, he's like, oh my God, like this should be a core class. He's like, this should be a core class. He's like, oh, we're actually talking about like interesting stuff. And he's like, what else am I going to do? Take a strategy class?
Yeah.
He's like, I could teach the strategy class,
Yeah.
right? He's like, this is why we came here, right? Like, why go to Oxford to do, an executive MBA or an MBA and you don't even like get any sort of intellectual stimulation, right? So.
Well, because as I said before, some people are not after the intellectual
No,
stimulation.
yeah, which is, yeah, but that makes it very hard to teach anything really, so.
Well, luckily you get the DPhils.
Yeah, the DPhils are I love the DPhils.
And
So,
you guys fund all of your DPhils. Which
yes,
is
we
nice.
do, but we don't have many,
Hmm.
so basically 3 a year, so,
I went to the 3 a year.
yeah.
I probably know who all of them are, or this from a few years ago, because
Yeah.
I went to one of your like recruiting events on
Oh, yeah.
open days. Yeah, I looked across them. I was looking at philosophy, theology, Saïd. Why not?
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
Saïd had this like open day.
yeah.
And the DPhils came in on Zoom and like told us about the research and such. It sounded great.
Yeah.
I learned about like what the Oxford colleges were. Like,
Yeah,
it was fun. Didn't pursue that path in the end,
yeah,
but in another life.
yeah.
Another life. Okay, last question about the graphic medicine movement. What is this, and what's your involvement with it?
So I got involved with it by complete chance. So during the pandemic, I was essentially desperate. I was just like, I need some sort of like something.
The COVID pandemic.
Yeah. COVID pandemic. Yeah. And so a lot of art schools went online, including the Royal Drawing School. And so they offered this comics class, like graphic novel comics class online, first online class that they had. So I signed up for it. And by like this huge coincidence, one of the founders of the graphic medicine movement was also a student in the class. And so, so we took the class, and then after the class, it was like pandemic, everyone's like freaking out, right? And like everyone, was like very talented, and I'm just like, I'm a finance academic, I'm just happy to be there, basically. But then after the class, we were like, oh, let's create a zine. And so then we basically, as a group, we called ourselves Distant Connections. So we had a little zine group, and we published, I think, 4 zines.
Amazing.
Yeah, with so one of the members was this graphic medicine co-founder, and I mean, like, what they're doing is amazing. I keep on thinking, oh, it'd be so great to bring that into, business or into, economics and finance. But it's a really impressive movement, where basically, do you know anything about it or?
No.
No. Oh, okay. All right. So basically, so there's this whole movement called graphic medicine, which is essentially using comics and visual narratives in the health space. And so there's many reasons for it, like, dealing with trauma, like explaining how to, like you name it, like interacting with patients,
Like you get the patients to participate or to
everything.
consume.
Everything. So consume, participate, like it's sort of like it's quite incredible. One of the founders of the graphic medicine movement, I think she's calls herself the comic nurse. And
Cool.
so they produce like comics about, healthcare and also education, right? So educating people about health topics and, as a different form of communication. I mean, it's like, and it's this huge thing. Like they have these huge conferences, and I mean, if you go to their website, it's like really impressive.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, it's really, I think they do amazing work, and it really, I think it really connects with people, right? Because it's a different form of communication. It's not like a bunch of people talking in lots of jargon, and so yeah, it's really cool. So then we had the zine group, and then we presented at this graphic medicine conference. And then you have all these people who are like, there's this whole culture that's into comics. So the people who do the comics, but also people who study comics, right? And so yeah, anyhow, so I've been at these conferences and had papers presented there, and
Amazing.
yeah,
Where do the conferences occur? Or
they
all
go
over?
around. They go around the world.
Okay.
Yeah,
Very cool.
yeah.
Very cool. Last question, your favorite book and favorite film?
Oh, geez.
I suppose that's
That's
2
so hard.
questions.
Yeah, but that's so hard because I like so many books. Okay.
Oh, you name a few, you're not restricted to one.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, one of my favorites growing up as a child was Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah,
I love Winnie
great.
the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh's great. Let's see. Other favorite books. Oh my God. I mean, it's just like I have so many books, and then it's like picking one. My other favorite books. And then favorite film. What's a favorite film? Okay, I've got to say Buster Keaton. Anything by The General. I'd say love Buster Keaton. So anything by Buster Keaton is amazing. And I like the classics, the black and white. I keep on trying to tell my son that, going to watch silent movies is like the best. But anyhow, yeah. So maybe The General, and then other books. Well, I guess we can leave it at Winnie the Pooh for now.
We can. What a place to end. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Renee.
Yeah, thanks for having me.